I'll share with you some moments from this Lloyd Austin hearing on the House today. The only thing I don't get, since when did falling ill or being sick become so political? Basically, if you're a serving member of President Biden's administration, you're not allowed to be sick. Not allowed to have no empathy or compassion could be shown for somebody who may be in hospital, may be receiving medical treatment. Is that what it's come to? Is that really what's going on? You fall sick. How dare you be sick? You put the world at risk. It's crazy.
Mr. Secretary, you recognize 5 minutes for any opening statements you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Smith, members of the committee, good morning. I'm grateful to this committee for your continued support for the Department of Defense and our outstanding troops. The U.S. military is the most powerful fighting force in human history, and with your help, we're going to keep it that way. The department is deeply focused now on meeting the pacing challenge from the People's Republic of China, on making the Middle East more secure after the October 7th terrorist assault on Israel, and on ensuring that Ukraine can continue to defend itself against Putin's war of aggression. So as always, we are focused on the defense of our nation. But I know that Congress has some legitimate concerns about some issues around my illness. So let me start by thanking all those who've offered me well wishes after my recent cancer treatment and hospital stay. I very much appreciate your kind words, and I received world-class medical care at Walter Reed. And I want to again publicly thank my doctors and the outstanding nursing staff. They expect me to be completely cured of my prostate cancer, which was caught early. And I continue to recover, and now I want to be very clear. There was never any lapse in authorities or in command and control. At all times, either I or the Deputy Secretary was in a position to conduct the duties of my office. But we did have a breakdown in notifications during my January stay at Walter Reed, and that is sharing my location and why I was there. And back in December, I should have promptly informed the President, my team in Congress, and the American people of my cancer diagnosis and subsequent treatment. Again, we did not handle this right, and I did not handle it right. As you know, I've apologized, including directly to the President, and I take full responsibility. I'm also taking responsibility for some institutional changes to make sure that this cannot happen again. It's not enough for me to pledge to do better. The system must be postured better to make the appropriate notifications when authorities are transferred. And my staff must be ready to carry all of this out. But let me be clear, I never intended to keep my hospitalization from the White House or from anybody else. That's why we immediately instituted changes to the way that the authorities can be temporarily transferred to my deputy and to the way that notifications get made. That's also why we conducted a 30-day review of the entire process. Now, because the review deals with the continuity of operations, its drafters wrote it as classified. But of course, we've shared that review with all of you. The 30-day review made 8 recommendations to me, and I've directed that all 8 recommendations be implemented. We put 2 in place already, and we're moving out quickly on the other 6. So let me quickly summarize them for you. We've made clear that we expect full information sharing when the deputy or another designated official assumes the functions and duties as acting secretary. We've issued written guidelines for clear information sharing between my staff and the deputy secretary staff if these scenarios arise. And we'll ensure that the department officials in the order of succession are familiar with and supported for the relevant processes. And we're moving quickly to develop a mandatory reporting protocol for personnel who support me or the Deputy Secretary in situations that might affect our ability to perform our duties and functions. Of course, we already have continuity of operations plans in place, and we'll continue to review and update those plans as appropriate. Now, even before the 30-day review, we already had made some changes. In the future, if the Deputy Secretary ever needs to temporarily assume the duties of my office, she and several White House offices will be immediately notified. That includes the White House Situation Room and the White House Chief of Staff. The key officials across the department will also be notified, including the Deputy Secretary, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and the General Counsel. And the reason for that assumption of duties will be included in writing. You saw these new procedures in action during my hospitalization earlier this month. And finally, the DoD Inspector General is still working on his own independent review, which we fully support. Now, before I take your questions, I want to again make one thing very clear. At no time during my treatment or recovery were there any gaps in authorities, and there were no risks to the department's command and control. And from the time that I resumed my duties on January 5th, I fully participated in national security decision-making on events in the Middle East and about military operations in self-defense to protect our troops and our facilities over there. Again, we're moving swiftly to put some helpful new procedures in place to prevent any lapses in notification. And I am confident that we will not experience the same issues in the future. So let me again thank you for the opportunity to be here today and for everything that this committee does to support, to stand by the mission and the people of the Department of Defense, including their families. I know you understand this, but one of the best things that you can do right now to support them is to pass a full-year appropriation. And doing so will ensure that our troops get paid, that our civilian employees can stay on the job, and that we can continue to procure and field the very best capabilities to defend our country. We need the flexibility and stability that full-year appropriations provide. Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Smith, I appreciate your leadership on that score, and I stand ready to assist you in any way. And with that, I'll be glad to take your questions.
First of all, let me say it is not remotely surprising to me that the Chinese and the Russians are not going to say anything positive about us. That doesn't come as a surprise to me. They seize on every opportunity to attack the United States. So I don't really take their word for what was going on. And a couple things to drill down on. One, it is fairly routine that the Secretary of Defense will be in places where you are not able to do everything you need to do, and that authority is transferred. I think a lot of people don't fully understand this. So can you walk us through, I mean, how often does it happen that you are in a place where you can't be as responsive as you need to be so that you pass the authority on to your Deputy Secretary?
Thanks. As pointed out in the 30-day review, there have been a number of times in the past where we transferred authorities because of my inability to have access to secure communications. And then once I had the ability to have access again to secure communications, that was transferred back. So that, and the number of times that that's happened is outlined in the 30-day review.
And was there, again, just to emphasize, was there any time during this process, in the first days of January when you were in the hospital, any time whatsoever when the Deputy Secretary wasn't in a position to fully carry out the responsibilities of the Secretary of Defense? Regardless of whether she was in Puerto Rico or Bermuda, Mexico or Mar-a-Lago or wherever, she was in a position to carry out all of the authorities that she had as the acting Secretary of Defense in that instance, correct?
She is legally and logistically positioned to assume the functions, and she was, you're right, in a position to be able to support the president as chief of staff, as he made decisions. So, commander in chief. So, she always has secure communications with her, just like me, and she has the situational awareness that's needed to be able to make effective recommendations to the president, and she, working with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and also the combatant commander, would propose options for the president in any situation.
Certainly, and one of the things I want to emphasize as this hearing goes forward is not to use this to the advantage of our adversaries, to use it as a partisan attack. There was nothing embarrassing about what happened here. There was nothing that makes us appear weak. The United States, as all of this was going on, as has been pointed out, was carrying out strikes against our adversary in order to protect our force. We were doing everything that we needed to do to meet the national security needs of this country. And if members of this committee incorrectly imply otherwise, they are merely giving aid and comfort to those adversaries that they claim to care about confronting. And I will also, one more time, emphasize that if we care about confronting our adversaries, rather than nitpicking the Secretary of Defense about his precise process in this situation, we should go ahead and pass the National Security Supplemental that the Senate has passed with 70 bipartisan votes to precisely meet those national security needs. Whatever Russia and Chinese propaganda machines may be cranking out about this situation, I assure you it pales in comparison to what they're cranking out about the fact that they think the United States is getting ready to abandon our ally in Ukraine. I would challenge any member on the other side of this aisle to claim that the Secretary of Defense not fully informing the President for 3 days is somehow more important than walking away from that obligation that we have made and that the whole world is watching us on. And with that, I yield back.
Now yields his question time to the chairman of the Subcommittee on Military Personnel, the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, help us get this straight. At what point during your hospital stay did you or your staff decide that the President should know about your hospitalization?
As I understand it, my chief of staff contacted the National Security Advisor and advised him that I'd been hospitalized on the 4th of January.
At what point during your stay was the 4th of January?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
How long into your stay was that?
Well, as we've pointed out, as has been pointed out earlier, I was admitted to the hospital
after you were
on the 1st
hospitalized?
of January. Right.
Okay. Yes or no, did you tell your staff not to inform the President, anyone on your staff?
I never told anyone not to inform the President, the White House, or anyone else about my hospitalization.
Okay, so the 30-day review summary lays a lot of blame at the feet of your staff. It seems that would appear, correct? For the breakdown in the process? You've told us that you are responsible, but the 30-day review seems to blame your staff.
Well, the 30-day review pointed out that that there were some missteps, but there was never any ill intent or an intent to obfuscate. So,
1 year ago, you told me in this hearing room you had no regrets about what happened in Afghanistan. Do you regret what happened here?
I've said that we didn't get this right, Congressman, and we put measures in place to ensure that the notification process is improved going forward.
Mr. Secretary, who will be held accountable?
The transfer of authority was
Who will be held accountable for this? This embarrassment?
Again, I take full responsibility, and we put measures in place to address the shortcomings.
Are you surprised the President didn't call for your resignation? I'm surprised, but are you surprised that he didn't call for your resignation?
The President has expressed full faith and confidence in me.
So you're not surprised that he didn't call for your resignation. Is it typical that the President would go 3 days without talking to his Secretary of Defense? Is that typical, or is that a regular posture? Do you usually go days without talking to the commander?
I mean, that can happen. It depends on whether or not the President's on travel. If I'm on travel, there are times when we do go days without direct communication.
So the big issue for me here is either the President is that aloof or you are irrelevant. Which one is it, Mr. Secretary? That the President would go 3 days without knowing that his Secretary of Defense is not on the job?
It's neither. The President is not aloof, and I participate in all of the.
Let me ask you this. On January 2nd, while you were in the hospital, President Biden was vacationing in the Caribbean. Your deputy, who the President didn't even know had operational control, was on a beach in Puerto Rico. What kind of message does that send to our adversaries?
The key piece is that, number one, the deputy has the ability to She has access to secure communications. She has the ability to participate in decision-making processes from wherever she is.
Mr. Secretary, our adversaries should fear us, and what you've done has embarrassed us. And let me sum this up by this. A leading Chinese propaganda outlet said that what happened to you exposed, quote, internal chaos. A leading Russian propaganda outlet said that your disappearance, quote, effectively compromised the
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair now recognizes Chair now recognizes the ranking member. Chair now recognizes the gentlelady from New York, Ms. Stefanik.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the morning of January 4th, Mr. Secretary, you were in the critical care unit. The acting Secretary of Defense was vacationing in Puerto Rico, and President Biden was unaware that you were not in the chain of command. Now, as you know, I represent Fort Drum in the 10th Mountain Division, which you know well. Thank you for your service there in the North Country. But on this same date of January 4th, do you know how many 10th Mountain Division soldiers were deployed and are still deployed today in Iraq and Syria in support of Operation Inherent Resolve?
I know that they are deployed. I don't know what the number is.
It's just over 2,500. And on January 4th, at approximately 4 a.m. our time, the U.S. carried out a significant strike against a senior Iranian-backed leader in Iraq, correct?
That's correct.
And because President Biden did not know you were outside of the chain of command during this U.S. strike, if Iran or its proxies in Iraq or Syria had carried out a retaliatory strike against 10th Mountain Division soldiers, the president's chain of command would have and could have broken down, potentially delaying presidential orders to protect lives of American forces, constituents that I represent. Do you understand why this is unacceptable to the American people and to those military families?
Well, thanks. First of all, I would say that when we're attacked, we have the right to defend ourselves and respond immediately if it's a local attack. If a strike is warranted, then recommendations need to be provided to the president. Those recommendations come through from me, and after I've consulted with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and also the combatant commander. The deputy secretary would have done the same thing. And she has all of the capabilities and situational awareness to do that.
Except the president wasn't aware. The president of the United States was not aware that you were not in the chain of command. So God forbid there was a retaliatory strike. Yeah, that would have caused potential delays, and it is unacceptable. Let me ask you this. What disciplinary action would a junior service member face if he or she failed to properly notify their chain of command and failed to report for duty?
If a service member was in a hospital, I think the chain of command would be concerned about why they're in a hospital and make sure that they're doing the right things to take care of them and their families.
But don't you think it's their responsibility to notify their commanding officer?
I think
the answer is yes.
Possible, yes. In my case, I would expect that my organization would do the right things to notify senior leaders if I am the patient in the hospital. Yeah.
It is unacceptable, and you have admitted as such that there was a breakdown in communication with the President of the United States, and I highlight the exact time, 4 a.m. January 4th, when you consider 10th Mountain Division soldiers and the potential for a retaliatory attack. That breakdown is unacceptable, and you said something very important. You said there was never a break in command and control. But yet the President of the United States was not aware that you were outside of the chain of the command. So is the President not a part of this command and control? Don't you believe that the Commander-in-Chief and the SecDef, that is critical for command and control?
He is clearly at the top of the chain in terms of command and control. But what's important is that we provide him with credible options and that he can pursue to address any situation. And it would have happened in this case because...
Except he was unaware. So what's important is the President was unaware of this breakdown in command and control, and you were not there in terms of who he would hear from.
Time's expired. Chair now recognizes gentleman from Florida, Mr. Gaetz.
You didn't tell the President that you had cancer, that you were being treated for cancer, or that the treatment for that cancer had gone wrong because you saw it as personal and medical. And I think a lot of us have empathy for you in that regard. But now that you see how personal medical decisions are, will you call for the re-recruitment, restoration of full rank and back pay for the 8,600 service members who were vax mandated out of the military?
No, I won't.
So on March 4th, 2021, you authored a memo. It was entitled Message to the Force. And in that memo, you said that there would be clear and swift accountability for anyone who didn't meet the highest standards of the Department of Defense. Now, however this worked out, we all acknowledge that what you did here didn't meet the highest standards, right? You made a mistake.
I admitted to...
Yeah, okay, so we got that. So then the question is, what becomes the clear and swift accountability? Now, you're not going to be discharged, right? No?
That's right.
Okay, you're not going to be suspended. You're not going to be demoted, and you're not going to have your pay cut. None of those things are going to happen to you, right?
That's right.
Okay, so you come here seeking some grace and some forgiveness. And I want you to know that one of the service members who you vax mandated out of the military sent me the parable of the unforgiving debtor. And it's in the book of Matthew, it's verses 21 to 35. The man fell down before his king and begged him, "Please be patient with me, and I will pay all the debt." Then his master, filled with pity for him, released him and forgave him of his debt. But when the man left the king, he went to a fellow servant who owed him a few $1,000s. He grabbed him by the throat and demanded payment. His fellow servant sat down and begged him for a little more time. "Be patient with me, and I will pay it," he pleaded. But his creditor would not wait. He had the man arrested and put in prison until the debt could be paid in full. When some of the other servants saw this, they were very upset. They went to the king and told him everything that had happened. And the king called the man who had been forgiven and said, "You evil servant, I forgave you that tremendous debt because you pleaded with me. Shouldn't you have mercy on your fellow servant, just as I had mercy on you?" Then the angry king sent the man to prison to be tortured until he had paid his entire debt. Mr. Secretary, you come to us seeking forgiveness, but you offer none. And it seems as though the pattern is repeated. You make a mistake, like on the vax mandate and here regarding your notification, then you get busted. President Biden had to sign something into law reversing your vax mandate. You got busted here, not because you came forward, but because we learned of this through other means. And then after you get busted making a mistake, you want that benefit, but you don't want to extend it to others. This isn't swift or clear. You're not meeting your own standards that you set for yourself. And you say that the DOD is a learning organization. Haven't you learned yet that the military is weaker, not stronger, with the 8,600 people that you vax mandated out of the military?
Just one point, Congressman. The reason I'm here is because the chairman requested that I appear to talk about the circumstances surrounding my hospitalization.
But don't you see the hypocrisy in it? Because you screwed up, we fix your screw up, and now you want grace. But these people who sought religious exemptions, they got no such grace. And also, I just think it's ridiculous that we're in 3 wars. You went AWOL for 3 days, and we get 2 hours with you. If you can't spend more than 2 hours answering these questions, I don't know how you really operate in all these wars.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair, I recognize the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, I certainly wish you a speedy recovery. I want to focus on the December 22nd date. That's the one I have the most difficult time with. I understand the other one was an emergency procedure where you were taken by ambulance to the hospital, if I'm correct. Is that right? The January procedure was emergency?
The January event was an emergency. I took an ambulance to the hospital. That's right.
But the December 22nd date, when did you know that you were going to have surgery on December the 22nd?
Well, I scheduled that surgery about a week prior to the actual surgery.
Okay.
I could lock in a date, and I took leave in order to do that, and I made sure that we transferred authorities to the deputy that day, and I resumed my duties the following day.
Okay, so you took leave, But you knew that you were going to take leave a week before the 22nd, correct?
That's right.
That's whenever you scheduled the surgery on for the 22nd, that would be when you knew. But she was not notified until the day of the procedure, is that correct?
This was coordinated several days before, so I don't know the exact date when she was notified. But
Okay, well, according to what we have, it appears that she wasn't notified. She was basically transferred the authority, but wasn't given the reason for the transfer of the authority. And I guess that's the thing I have the hardest time with is not the emergency procedure, but it is knowing a week in advance that you're going to be under anesthesia, out for 48 hours, give or take some time there, and why she wasn't notified at that time that she needed to be prepared to receive the authorities at that stage. My understanding is that she was in Puerto Rico, not in continental U.S. at that time. Is that correct?
that's not correct.
Okay.
22nd, she was in the States.
Okay, she was in continental. Okay. I just think when we know that you as the Secretary of Defense, there are 435 members of the House, 100 members of the Senate, but there's one Secretary of Defense. When we know that you're not going to be capable of making the decisions, that the sooner the person who is going to be in the position knows what and why, I think the better we as a country are from making sure things have happened or happen the way they should. I respect you. I wish you a speedy recovery. That's my primary concern. The emergency procedures, I think we've lessons learned the hard way. Won't happen again, no matter who's in the seat. I want to say this with regard to some of the comments that have been made about Republicans and who we want to win in Ukraine. Let me assure you, we want the Ukrainians to win, and we want Putin to lose. But one of the key things that many of us have asked for, that have voted for the Ukrainians repeatedly, is the enforcement of the sanctions against Russia. And simply sending the Ukrainians weapons or money is not going to win the war against Russia and Putin. The sanctions have to be enforced. That is something that I have personally asked for in the package that's coming to the floor, and something that I think those of us who know the issue recognize it's more than just weapons and money that Ukraine has to have to win the war. With that, Mr. Secretary, I wish you the best and certainly keep you in our prayers.
Chair, now recognize